Welcome to the stand review for Gold Experience Requiem. This is the latest stand to be added to TCA as of the recording of this. One new one is coming very soon, I think, so it'll either be out by the time you see this or coming pretty soon. Regardless, Gold Experience Requiem has been out for a little bit now, and so I wanted to do a review on it because this stand is phenomenal, but it's also a little bit confusing and hard to get a grasp on. So for those of you who are either struggling to use this or not understanding what it's doing, so you're struggling to fight against it, that's what this video aims to resolve. Regardless, I want to try to make these stand reviews more quick and concise rather than dragging them out for too long. So we're going to jump straight into the moveset and talk about exactly what GER is capable of. In terms of offensive moves, GER has two of them, the first of which being Vigor Punch. Vigor Punch is a blockable, uncancelable, stunning move. When you hit someone with it, it does a little bit of initial damage and then some more damage over time, and the amount of damage that the damage over time does is based on your upgrades. The other offensive move is the Life Beam of Creation. This is a multifunction move. The first is based off of a direct hit. If you direct hit someone, it'll do initial damage, as well as immediately summoning scorpions based on your upgrades right afterwards that'll apply even more damage to the opponent. If they're blocking, it'll block break them, but the scorpions will not be triggered. The other function of the move happens if you do not directly hit the opponent. If you shoot the ground and your opponent is either in the radius or walks into the radius, as it's sort of a pseudo trapping move, they'll be trapped in place as well as taking a little bit of damage. This effect doesn't block break, but it does go directly through your block and you can't parry it. Those are all GER's offensive moves, which are relatively straightforward. The real brunt of GER's kit, though, is its utilities. The first and hands down least impactful utility move is Selfless Distribution. This is a move that does exactly what its name implies. When you hit somebody with it, it heals them. It's a heal directly related to healing teammates and is incapable of healing yourself unless you hit some sort of reflection move with it. Moving over to the more heavy hitters, and we have Requiem's ability. This is a counter that, when activated, stuns your opponent completely, as well as giving you considerable invincibility. The move stuns long enough to land any move in the entire game that you can think of, as well as being able to tack on quite a few M1s before that move if you know you're going to land the counter. If you miss, the end lag is not absolutely ridiculous, but it is enough for a smart player to hit you with a beatdown or some larger move. The other relatively straightforward yet powerful utility move is Final Requiem. This is a self buff that doesn't last very long, but is considerably helpful when it's activated. When you use it, it'll increase your speed by about 20%, as well as your damage by 20%. The damage buff is nice, but the real kicker here is the speed buff. Being able to go faster than your opponents in TCA is really strong, and so having the ability to have speed at the push of a button, especially for a stand like GER that doesn't really have any direct movement options, is really strong. And finally, the last move that GER has is Return to Zero.
This godforsaken item. The amount I had to go through to get it, oh lord. Whoa, hold up a second. I think I might have gone a little bit too far back to avoid that attack.
This is the most unique move that GER has, and consequently the most confusing. Return to Zero basically has two variants, with some of the properties being shared across the two different variants and some of them not. The main properties that are shared by both variants of Return to Zero are that they give you invincibility when the move is activated until you're actionable, as well as healing back any damage that you took within the last 5 seconds if you have it fully upgraded. This damage taken can be visualized on your health bar at the top of your screen by a slightly less opaque green bar. Now, in terms of the two different variations, These are triggered depending on whether or not you're stunned. If you use Return to Zero when you're not stunned, it will stun people in a short radius around your character for a very short amount of time. It's not enough to really confirm any moves. It does end you positive though, which means that a lot of people are going to block or do some sort of defensive option, which opens up aggression. The other variant of the move is the cutscene variant, and this is triggered when you're stunned. Because Return to Zero can be used at any time, including when you're stunned, if you use it during a stun, rather than stunning the opponent, it will put both of you in a cutscene, and then at the end of the cutscene, it will ragdoll the opponent and desummon their stand. That wraps up the moveset portion of this stand review though, so we're going to move over to the strategies, and I'll talk about how you should be using Gold Experience Requiem. Welcome to Strategies. GER, in all honesty, is not super difficult to play. It might seem daunting at first, but in reality, GER is one of those stands that's really good for lower skilled players, mostly because lower skilled players have a tendency of taking a lot of damage in large combos that they otherwise could have avoided, and then you can just kind of hit one button on your keyboard and turn all of that damage off. Now that being said, I'll be sort of going move by move, starting with Vigor Strike. Vigor Strike is one of those moves that you should be using during M1 trades when you think you can catch someone off guard. It really depends on whether or not your opponent has any idea what they're doing or not. And thankfully for you, most people won't. If you start doing an M1 trade with your opponent, because Vigor Strike has armor on it, if you use it and they M1 you, you'll hit them anyway, and then that'll start a combo for you. Now after you land Vigor Strike, this is where you can do any number of things. Vigor Strike does directly true combo Life Beam, albeit the timing is a little bit tight. Oftentimes, it's actually better to use a Vigor Strike, 1M1, and then a Life Beam, because if you do this, your opponent is likely to block and you'll get a block break. The only times that you shouldn't be attempting to do this are against people with counters when you know that their counter is available. This is an untrue combo string that may work a lot of the time, but if someone's mashing a counter at this point, well, you're just sort of setting yourself up for failure, and it's also incredibly obvious when you're about to do it. If you see someone trying to counter this way, just M1 them and then wait. They'll likely waste their counter, and if they don't, well, you go back to neutral. Not a huge loss for you, but at the very least, you haven't been countered. Life Beam has a myriad of applications, one of which I already discussed, using it after you hit a Vigor Strike. But you can also use Life Beam to slow down or completely stop an opponent that's trying to flee. One of the big problems that GER can sometimes struggle with is catching opponents that are running away from you. Because it doesn't have any direct mobility moves aside from the Awakening buff, you don't have too many ways of catching up to people, and that's where your Life Beam comes in. If you can hit the ground near or in front of your opponent so that they walk into it, you'll root them in place, which lets you run up to them and start attacking them. Your counter is a really powerful tool, because if you land it, you can get 3 to 4 M1s, a Vigor Strike, and a Life Beam, which does a seriously good amount of damage. That being said, the counter is going to work really well against bad players, and not nearly as well against more skilled players. Against the bad players, you can usually just throw this out during an M1 trade, almost even let them start winning the trade so they think they've got a chance, and then hit that button. Against better players though, you're usually better off waiting until your opponent tries to go for some sort of option that's committal. So if, for example, you notice that your opponent often goes for 1 or 2 M1s and then a spec block break, you can wait for the 1 or 2 M1s, then react to the spec block break as they're usually not that fast, and then you can counter their spec block break, and there you go. Also, because a lot of players aren't very good, they won't be super good at punishing your counter. So a lot of the time against worse players you can just chuck this out, but against better players you need to hold on to it. The one thing to note with the counter, and something that segues into the next move, is that Final Requiem is really good when used in conjunction with the counter. Because it gives you a 20% damage buff and comes out basically instantly, you can pop this right after landing your counter and then hit them with your moves, and you'll just be getting 20% more damage, and then after your combo's done, you'll have the speed buff which continues to apply pressure, and a lot of players are going to crack under that pressure, make mistakes, and bada boom bada bam, there you go. As for that Final Requiem buff, this is something that I say very often with a lot of quote-unquote ultimate moves, and this isn't really an ultimate move, but the same logic applies, and that's that usually with this stuff, the sooner you use it, the better. Because the sooner you use it, the faster you're going to get it back, and the more times that you're going to be able to use it in a match. With this, because it comes out basically instantly, there's often not really a wrong time to go about using it. It can technically be more effective if you use it after you get a counter, but if you're unable to land a counter and you're still not using the move, then it's just sort of sitting there being wasted. Lastly, we have Return to Zero. This move has so many different ways to use it, it's incredible. But the absolute worst way to use it is to immediately escape a stun after not taking that much damage. And here's why. If the opponent block breaks you, and they're doing a few M1s and then they're going to go for a beatdown or some other high damage move, maybe another combo extender, and you use your Return to Zero right off the bat to get out of the combo before they do any of that other stuff, you've barely gained anything and used your ultimate move. If you had waited until they'd done a few M1s and then threw out the stun or threw out the beatdown and then used Return to Zero there, you not only get your health back, but you also deny them the use of that move by completely negating it right before it hits you. Because beatdowns and all these bigger damage moves are so easily reactable, it's perfectly reasonable to just wait, let them attempt the damage, and then if they don't, then you can just not use Return to Zero and you've still got it. That being said, the Return to Zero nuance on when you should use it is very interesting, depends on the matchup, and there really isn't a right or wrong answer here. There have been many times where I thought that I used RTZ at the right time and then immediately got caught in some sort of large combo or something else right afterwards that took way more health than the initial thing that I used Return to Zero on. That being said, a lot of the time, if you see yourself take around 40 to 70 damage in quick succession, that's when it's time to hit the button. In a perfect scenario, you'll use Return to Zero when you're close up to the opponent after taking a bunch of damage and you're not stunned, because this means that you'll stun the opponent and then right afterwards you'll be ended slightly positive, so you can go for a spec block break, which usually breaks their guard, your life beam, which also usually breaks their guard because people like to block here, or just start trying to M1 them or hit them with a combo extender. The point is, this is the most positive you can get out of your Return to Zero, because you got your health back, and now you've got an interaction that you're winning. That being said, sometimes it's better to just use Return to Zero right off the bat to make sure you don't risk losing a bunch of health. If someone's time stopped you and they did a whole bunch of damage, and you're not sure if you can get close enough to the opponent to use Return to Zero to negate the damage and get the stun, better safe than sorry. Just use Return to Zero right off the bat. Generally speaking though, the rules of thumb are wait until the opponent uses their moves if they block break you or hit a combo extender, and if you get the chance, use it to stun the opponents rather than waiting until there's some sort of big combo. With the introduction of accessories and all that sort of stuff, I want to start talking about what good builds are for the stand in these stand reviews. Right now, hands down the best spec for GER is Vampire. That's likely because Vampire, especially with Space Ripper Stingy Eyes, is a little bit over-tuned right now, something that will be changed. But regardless of those changes that are coming, Vampire is likely still going to remain the best spec for Gold Experience Requiem. Vampire's freeze just works really, really well with this stand, because when you use it, you can use your life beam, which is either a guaranteed stun or a guaranteed block break if they don't have a counter, which is just a really good option to have. And because all GER has is life beam and vigor strike, if you're trying to go out of your way to use other specs that have these crazy stun confirms and all this other stuff that you don't need because you don't have any moves, it's just not really worthwhile. So if you're looking for a spec, Vampire right now is definitely the way to go. As for accessories, this is where you can get creative, because there's a lot of good options here. In terms of casual play, the number one best accessory is probably the Accelerated Bible, solely because it can reduce your cooldown on Return to Zero by a decent amount. Because Return to Zero is a move that directly hits your opponent, and Accelerated Bible is based directly off of hitting your opponent to lower your cooldowns, if you hit the opponent with Return to Zero while using the Bible, the cooldown is lower, and that's just really good. On that same front, because so many of your moves are relatively easy to confirm or confirm off of each other, once again, you're just sort of lowering your cooldowns for not really losing out on a whole lot. In the background footage you're playing, I was using Jonathan's chestplate on top of Jonathan's shirt, although that combination works well with literally any stand in the game, as it gives you 20% more damage at no real cost to you. GER is quite well equipped to get block breaks, so Diavolo's outfit is also a relatively solid choice here to just get those extra bits of damage when you get a block break or a parry. But with that, that's all I have to say about the strategies, so we're going to move over to the counterplay and talk about how you should be fighting against Gold Experience Requiem. Fighting against GER can be pretty daunting at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty straightforward. The general rules of thumb are just understanding what it has, which we've already talked about, on top of trying to not get hit by the counter or any sort of return to zero cheese nonsense. What I mean by that is if you get the chance, do chip damage whenever possible rather than relying desperately on huge, large combos. If you're using a stand that relies heavily on large combos, you're probably going to be in trouble against this stand on a general front. That being said, I have noticed a few tips and tricks that you can use to take advantage of that will directly result in having an easier time against Gold Experience Requiem. And the first one of those things is that you can use your ultimate to directly bait out and effectively delete Return to Zero. A lot of stands have ultimate abilities, whether it be Time Stop, Time Acceleration, Time Erase, etc. Those abilities can oftentimes result in some pretty hefty damage, but a lot of the time it's usually better to hold on to those abilities until you get the direct opportune time to use them. That being said, against GER, it's probably better off to just throw these out at your nearest convenience in order to directly deny them the use of Return to Zero and force them to use it. A lot of players, after getting hit by one of these ultimate moves, are going to just assume that it did a lot of damage and spam out their RTZ. Some better players aren't going to pick up on this, but most people are not. And so if you use something like Star Platinum Time Stop, something that for all intents and purposes doesn't do that much damage at about medium range, and then run in and start attacking the GER, in all likelihood, after it's over, they're going to RTZ that damage back. But the thing is, that time stop likely didn't do a whole lot of damage, and what you just got out of that was the ability to combo them later without the risk of RTZ screwing it up. This isn't a surefire way to deal with RTZ, but against a lot of opponents, it's gonna work. Now when it comes to things to look out for, the number one thing is trying not to get hit by Vigor Strike during M1 trades. Just be aware that it's coming, because it's uncancelable, but it's also pretty easy to react to. There's a big outline on the character whenever they use it, so as long as you're not mashing your keyboard and pressing a whole bunch of buttons and you're paying attention, you should be able to block this move. And once you have blocked this move, feel free to start going aggro because they don't have an uncancelable move. But be aware that they've still got their counter ready if they haven't used it already. The counter is scary, but keep in mind that if they've already used Vigor Strike, the amount of damage that they can get off the counter becomes a lot more limited because they don't have their big combo extender anymore. If you get countered, it's time to start mashing dash and hope that they screw up their combo or dash out of it after they finish. Do not block. People love to block when they're getting comboed out of the counter, and then they just get hit by Life Beam and get block broken and take even more damage. Don't do that. You look stupid. As for stands that are good against GER, I think the best one is probably Star Platinum of the World. Star Platinum of the World excels against Gold Experience Requiem solely based on the quick time stop that has a relatively low cooldown that's almost shared identically, if not completely shared identically, with Return to Zero. Because Star Platinum of the World's time stop is so fast and can do a decent amount of damage, you're basically forcing the GER to use RTZ every single time you do a time stop. And the time stop is so quick that you can just throw it out at basically any range, and the chance of it getting cancelled is very low. This limits GER a lot to just its current kit, which Star Platinum of the World can pretty easily contend with its high destructive power and pretty good moves. If you're looking for a stand that's going to lose against Gold Experience Requiem, probably Whitesnake. Just don't even try. If you're using Whitesnake against GER, good luck. Same with Six Pistols. Six Pistols, death sentence. Don't even try. It's not worth it. With that, we're wrapping up Counterplay, so let's jump into the conclusion. In conclusion, GER is really strong. This stand is very good, and I think we're going to see a pretty good amount of use of it. That being said, I also don't think it's going to continue to be nearly as popular as it's been right after the update dropped. Because GER doesn't do that massive amount of damage that some of these other stands do, like the World Over Heaven or Star Platinum of the World, I can't see a ridiculous amount of people using it, but solely based on the fact that it's a popular stand and it's got a really unique and fun mechanic, I think that GER is going to stand the test of time. It's definitely one of my favorite stands to play right now, if not hands down my favorite stand to play right now. It's super fun, and if you haven't gotten it and given it a shot already, I highly recommend it. With that though, we're wrapping up here. So if you enjoyed the video, you can leave a like and subscribe. If you didn't, don't. And with all that being said, have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you guys next time.